Okay.
Is it alive and thriving? Is it
Okay. What's the question is, what's the state of traditional monasticism in the church? I think Larry's going to talk about this a bit tomorrow night, right? From what I understand, is that the number of professions in the traditional orders are still going down. That's the brothers or sisters who take life vows to a lifetime commitment within the monastery. But the number of associates or oblates or third orders connected to the monastery are increasing exponentially. So I was reading an article just the other day of a Benedictine community that is now down to 6 professed brothers, but they had something like 300 oblates who were men and women in everyday walks of life, but who wanted to be connected to the rule and to the monastery. Now that is producing a crisis, because the 6 professed monastics can't sustain the 300 oblates, right? In terms of the new monasticism, the associates, the domestics, the oblates, whatever they're called in that particular community, they are living a form of the new monasticism, which is secular monasticism, which is not enclosed in the monastery, but is actually lived in society according to the rule. So I think that would be my assessment of it. And Larry might have a different...
That's about right. There's some interesting movements to try to create some new traditional forms of monasticism, so which I'll talk about a little bit more tomorrow night. So they're new in the sense that they're relatively recently founded, but not necessarily new in the way we might talk about the new monasticism. So they're following a more traditional pattern.
I think also it would be interesting when we share tomorrow night that I know some of you have been oblates in different communities, and it would be interesting to share those experiences of connecting with the more traditional monasticism.
You mentioned the aspect of the generation of the creation of the monastics and communities is coming out of protest. Each of you have the Protestant movement was that part of that stream, and then an associated history question is about the Anabaptists and how you might view the Anabaptists.
Okay.
In this regard.
Okay, so the question is about whether Protestantism in the 16th century was, as a protest, was a kind of new monastic movement, and what about the Anabaptists? I think Lutheranism particularly was a reaction against the atrophy of monasticism, but I wouldn't classify the mainstream reformers as a new monastic movement. However, I would say that the Anabaptist movement had many of the aspects of the spirit of monasticism. If you look at the list, seeking enlightenment, yes, they were a rule of life. If you think, John, of things like the Sly-Time Confession, there you've basically got a rule, right? That's
in Living Hope, our rule is simple: serve and sing.
yes, yeah, and spiritual disciplines. The Anabaptists certainly did that. Connectedness to a tradition, yeah. Concern for the poor and the marginalised, obviously, that's they were that. Catholic or ecumenical spirit, they fall down, right? They were not interested in that. But 5 out of 6 is not bad, and there's quite a number of historians that said that that the radicals of the 16th century were a kind of monastic, lay monastic movement. So and what's interesting, John, which I'll talk a bit more about tomorrow, is that both here in the USA, it's partly the Anabaptist Mennonite peacemaking ideas from people like Shane Claiborne, and in the UK the Anabaptist Network are now linking with the Anglican New Monastics Northumbria Community. And my journey was very much that. I was Anabaptist and then discovered the monastics, and so kind of brought those two together for myself. Yeah.
And what you usually think of when you hear Baptist in the States, that's very little to do with that.
Yes, yes, that's true. Baptist in the state doesn't mean that, which is why I stopped being Baptist. And I got fed up saying, well, I'm Baptist minister, but not that kind of Baptist.
Some of my friends at different college who were Baptist, but not of what we typically think of, but more of the Anabaptist stream, called themselves Baptish.
Baptish. Yeah. Yes. So any other comments before we have our reception?
Did you do any research or have any comments to make about the subgroup of Eremitic monasticism called Anchoritic?
The Anchorites. I've read a little bit about them, Scott, and I'd be interested to hear your take, because I wouldn't have myself made a distinction between the Eremites and the Anchorites, but
Well, that's why I think of them as a subgroup of the Eremites. But I guess what differentiates an Anchorite as opposed to a hermit proper is it where a hermit proper is kind of doing their individual thing out in the wilderness.
yes,
An Anchorite is living their rule in a solitary fashion, but they are attached
attached to the
a
monastery, yeah.
particular community.
Yeah,
The prime example, of course, is for me is
Julian,
Julian.
yeah. Yes,
So she was a hermitess.
yes,
But she lived out her monasticism and her ministry, living attached to the cell of the
Yes.
church.
yes, yes, yes. That's a good distinction. Yeah.
So she's by herself, but she's
Connected.
connected,
Yes.
but not quite in a community.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good distinction. Well, I think we will finish on that, and hopefully this will give us lots to talk about, and think about, and meditate about. Okay.